Welcome everyone to Invisible Architectures series on YouTube. And today we have my name is Carol Assa, and today we have a really exciting guest named Vanessa Black, who I've known through the years with Feng Shui and when she was a massage therapist in Bakersfield, and then she went on to school, and now she's a practicing homeopathic doctor. And she just keeps going and going, and she has her own practice. And welcome, Vanessa.
Thank you, Carol. Thanks for having me. And also, when I had my bookstore, you were coming through there doing,
Yeah, no, it was
actually, that's where I met you before I owned it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it just like that. And then everyone go, Bakersfield. And then I go, yeah, they have feng shui and all this metaphysical stuff. And everybody couldn't put that together, but it was like that. It was really happening. So let me look. So for your, so beyond being having your homeopathic practice, you're now a doctoral candidate at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Depth Psychology, Semantic Specialization Program. And she explores research in dyadic relationships with focuses on psycho.
You want me to say it real quick?
It's okay. So, so she's currently the alumni board representative for diversity and inclusion at Pacific Graduate Institute, a board member of the California Homeopathic Medical Society, and a member of Deepening Humanity in Homeopathy, an organization dedicated to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility in homeopathy. Wow, you're in a lot.
I am, yeah.
So we're going to, because I think a lot of people hear about homeopathy and allopathy, the regular medicine people have, like that's, pushed today. And so I wanted to kind of give a background because I kind of know, but they don't know the differences. And then it was Hahnemann was the founder, right?
Yeah,
so
Samuel Hahnemann.
You kind of go in the history of it, and then we'll kind of go through the differences. And I mean, there's major differences. The reason I love the homeopathy so much, it's so personalized.
Yeah, it's very individualized, and I think that's its gift.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that probably distinguishes it most from allopathic medicine. And that's what people enjoy about it, is the individualized care that they get and the individualized remedies that are really tailored specifically to them.
Yeah. So, and they're more treating the whole person. They don't look at it like, like with the allopathic, there's a name for every disease. It's the whole person more, right?
Yeah. There's a name, and also there's a specialization for each part of the body, and pretty soon you're like dissected out into all these pieces, and sometimes you wonder if like one specialization even understand what's going on from the other, like if they're all communicating with each other, because certainly your body communicates with all its individual aspects. It's an entire organism. And so that's one of the things that definitely distinguishes it from allopathic medicine.
Okay, so let's get into the history, how it all started. I mean, it goes way back to
it's ultimately a younger medicine. Hahnemann just kind of stumbled into homeopathy to some degree because he was frustrated with allopathic medicine at the time. He sort of felt like people were getting poisoned from some of the medication, some of the treatments of the time, like mercury and things like that. And so he kind of ascribed to this idea of, what kinds of things cause disease. The like treats like sort of premise of homeopathy is, and this is like a pattern that's in depth psychology, and it's in other forms that you may even know of. It's kind of almost like a universal law that the remedy is near the poison, or the gift is in the wound. And we say these kinds of things all the time. And so homeopathy sort of has this premise that like treats like. So we can use coffee for an example. Coffee is a stimulant. It keeps you awake. And if you take too much of it, it will keep you awake and stimulate you. But if you are awake and stimulated when you should be sleeping and you haven't had coffee, you could take the remedy coffee to
Oh,
to bring that stimulus down.
mm.
And that's kind of how homeopathy is designed, around that sort of similarity, or like treats like premise.
So Hahnemann, when are we talking? What time period are we talking?
This was just around 200 years ago. So, in terms of like Chinese medicine and stuff, it's actually relatively young.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But, and, of course, as a alternative medicine, it has its issues, in terms of acceptance into the mainstream. And, it's kind of been marginalized in some ways. And part of that is because of the way homeopathy is made. So homeopathy is highly diluted and succussed or potentized. And the idea of it is something that people a lot of times have a hard time grappling with. Is like, how do you add a bunch of water to something until it becomes almost nothing and then call it homeopathy? But, just because we can't measure things yet
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean they don't have an impact. Doesn't mean that they don't carry an energetic matrix or a pattern, an energetic pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably know quite a bit about that through your work.
Well, in succuss, you shake it.
Yeah,
So
you
maybe
shake
we
it or
can go
pound it.
into the whole, because those words maybe a lot of people don't know.
Yeah. So to make a remedy, you would get, remedies are sourced from plants, animals, minerals, drugs,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes diseased tissue, and sometimes organs, human tissue, organ tissue. And what is done is there's you say a plant substance, you take part of that plant substance, and it's sort of how much of the plant is used, whether it's the leaves or the whole plant, depends on a lot of things. It can depend on how the person is wanting to use that remedy.
Mm-hmm.
If they're wanting to just prove that a certain part of the remedy, or if they're wanting to use the whole entire plant substance. Same thing with animals. Sometimes you'll see animal remedies that are made from feathers or from blood or from bone, or things like that. So it might be a specific part. So there's a tincture that's created. It's called a mother tincture, which
Mm-hmm.
is the substance, say a plant substance mixed with alcohol, creates the mother tincture. And then to create a remedy, you'll take 1 drop of the mother tincture to 9 drops or 9 parts of water.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how the dilution begins. And that's a 1x.
Mm-hmm.
And you could take 1 part of the mother tincture and dilute it by 99 parts water, and then you get 100x.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how it goes. And potencies are X's, C's, M's, and CM's, MM's, CM's. So that's like a CM is 100.
And so the more it's diluted, it gets more powerful, right?
It gets, yeah. And
I mean, that's what I understand.
Yeah, it does get more powerful or potent. That doesn't mean that it's more effective. Like, I saw something where a lady was talking about this the other day, and she said that the efficacy is better the higher it goes up in potency. That's actually not true. Efficacy is not related to potency, but it does become more potent. So you move out of the crude substance, which is at the X sort of level,
Right.
And you move towards energetic substance and into the realm of matrix or pattern, energetic pattern. We call it the doctrine of signatures in homeopathy. So the doctrine of signature is that every living thing has its own like thumbprint, its own unique pattern or matrix. And so even, within botanical families, you may have a similar matrix, but there's individualizing qualities. So you'd say you have, in the strychnine family, you have Nux vomica and Ignatia, 2 remedies. They may have some similar qualities, but there's things that distinguish them from each other.
Okay, now, like when Hahnemann is discovering all of this, Is he dowsing? Is he muscle testing? How's he doing this?
He's figured it out on accident initially through an accidental proving of a remedy. So a proving is done through taking a substance, crude substance, to see what kinds of symptoms it creates. And then those symptoms are usually considered to be the symptoms that it would cure. So in his case, it was chinchilla bark, and it creates diarrhea and vomiting in its crude substance, sort of malarial symptoms. And as it turns out, that bark is very good at treating malaria. And a lot of times when we get people with, and so that he stumbled upon this, with a lot of times when we get people who've had chronic irritable bowel syndrome or things like that, where they've been really depleting their system through vomiting or diarrhea, you give them the chinchilla bark and it will help bring the body back into balance. So, and all remedies kind of work off of that principle. So provings are how we get to decide what remedies work in what way. And you can extrapolate a lot because, you know, you can look at, you know, herbology and say, well, this plant does these things if you take it. So it may have really positive effects, but it might also have some negative effects. So you could look at those negative effects and go, wow, these are the symptoms if you take this herb for too long or in too high of potency, it can create these symptoms. Well, then homeopathic version of that herb would cure those symptoms.
Wow, it's so amazing. I mean, that he discovered, you know, like got into
it. Yeah. And it was truly out of just a frustration. So, you know, of the time, because the crude substances of the time were so harmful to people. When you're looking at mercury treatments and things, you know, things of that nature, it was really, really intense, you know. And sometimes, you know, his thing was kind of like, if people are dying from the treatment, then we're not really helping people. So anyway, yeah. And, you know, that's the beauty of homeopathy is that it's so gentle because of the dilution. You don't have a crude substance. It's past Avogadro's number. So it's diluted so much that there's no measurable amount of substance. And that is what people complain about in terms of like homeopathy. But it's also the benefit because it's super, super gentle. So it's good for infants and pregnant women and elderly, and, you know, it's just, it can be very powerful without having side effects.
You always hear that, like, you know, like the ones who want to debunk it, like there's nothing there, like, because they can't prove it. Because it's so subtle. I mean, it's gone into other dimensions. It's like.
Right, exactly. And I love that, you know, I actually love that about it because that tells me, you know, for one, it's so incredibly powerful. And so many of the people who are working to debunk it have never had an experience with it. So it's like, unless you want to have an experience of it, then you don't know what you're talking about, you know? So it's like, but you know, I in my own personal life, that's kind of why I came into homeopathy. I had some really powerful experiences with it. When I had my son, I had a powerful experience with it. And then when he was young, we used homeopathy and had some really powerful experiences with it. And homeopathy is really brilliant in that it doesn't just work with physical symptoms. It works with mental, emotional symptoms really, really well. So there are remedies that are for fright and trauma that are super powerful. So one of the things that happens when you're traumatized or you come into, you know, you have a shock, or, you know, maybe you go out and you know, somebody passes away, say, then and you have this experience of grief, you kind of can get in that state, but over time that state can kind of linger and become protracted, and it sort of becomes your new normal. Well, with homeopathy, when we take a case, we look at it and go, well, when did your life sort of, you know, take a turn? When did, you know, what happened? You know, somebody will say, oh, I have this rash and this thing and that thing. It's like, well, what happened before that? Oh, my dad died, or oh, my kitten got hit by a car, or whatever kind of thing. And so then you're really looking at what sort of created the state, what caused the shift in the vital force, the vital energy of the organism. And you, when you start to look at that, you start going, okay, that will get you closer to the remedy. So like as it stands now, there's probably over 5,000 remedies, known remedies. And when, as a homeopath, when I take a case, I want to understand everything person. Say, you know, I'm taking your case. I want to understand if there were 20 Carols in a room, what would make you unique and individualized? And this goes start to speak to the individualizing aspects of homeopathy that are different than allopathy. So you may say, well, I have asthma. And when I have asthma, I can go outside and or open the refrigerator door and stand there, and all of a sudden it gets better. Another person named Carol might have asthma.
You do for asthma?
No, I mean, but some people know.
Oh, I just wondered.
Yeah, some people, like a lot of parents will have this experience where they have this really asthmatic kid, and it's the middle of winter, and they're having their asthmatic flare up, and they load them up to take them out to the hospital, and as soon as they step out into the winter cold, the asthma gets better.
Oh, I've never heard that.
Yeah, so it's a modality, better by cold air or fresh air, that tells us as homeopaths something about your particular case of asthma. For someone else, cold air might make it worse. So we're looking at all those little nuances within the case to rule out certain remedies and rule in other remedies. So it's through looking at your specific symptoms, the things that make it better or worse, say the times of day when it's better or worse. You know, some people are great, but then come evening, they feel really bad, you know, when they're sick. Or, you know, they may be depressed and they wake up in the morning and they feel like, you know, they can't do it. But as the day goes on, they feel better. We look at those kinds of things, and that helps give us a clue into what remedy we're looking for.
Because when you're talking about these emotions, it reminds me so much of Bach flower remedies. Do they incorporate that? And do they?
Some people do, and there's a lot of homeopaths that use adjuncts. They use Bach flower remedies, and they work beautifully together. And actually, if you're interested in talking to someone who does this, I have this great friend who does beautiful work with Bach flower remedies.
Oh, that would be a great one. Yeah. But just when I was thinking of the emotions, I wondered if they put it, you know, potentized it, succussed it, and could make those more powerful too, right?
Yeah, I mean, I believe he was a homeopath, and he developed some remedies too. So he kind of understands the premise of Bach understand the premise of homeopathy. I don't know that much about the flower remedies. I don't use them in my practice because I've just been I went straight from homeopathic. I went straight from homeopathic school into graduate school, and so I didn't spend time going down that lane. But there are people who do that and use other different types of cell salts and chemotherapies and stuff that are great adjuncts to use with homeopathy.
You know, so when we go back to the history, I remember this that homeopathy was like used more than allopathy at the turn of the last century, right?
Yeah,
it was one method.
Yeah, there's reasons why, you know, medicine, you know, became so exclusive. And there's this idea of this Townsend letter that came out, and it sort of created this like very isolated group of practitioners and shunned chiropractors and osteopaths and anybody who wasn't, you know, American Medical Association. And that was a thing, you know, at one point that really caused a deep rift in medicine in terms of alliance, I think. But, you know, in India, many, if not most, medical doctors are also homeopaths, and homeopathy is practiced widely in India still. So when you go into a hospital there, it's highly likely that you're going to have access to a doctor who knows homeopathy and will use homeopathic remedies along with Western medicine.
Now
Or
this
not Western medicine,
is going
conventional
back
allopathic
to
medicine.
traditional Indian medicine, or did they follow the Hanuman course?
No, they followed Hahnemann courses, so they're
Oh,
not like Ayurvedic. No, they're
yeah.
conventional medicine and homeopathic medicine.
It's
And for
interesting.
all I know, they may use Ayurvedic medicine within that. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But that India would go that route, like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So
is it money one of the main things? You can make
I
more
don't
money in
know.
one or not.
I don't know that there's a ton of money in homeopathy. I mean, I think certain practitioners do well for themselves,
No, I
but
mean, you make more allopathically with just
right, in terms of, yeah. Well, when people are spending like, I mean, what does it cost for an EpiPen nowadays, right?
no, it's just
It's like almost $1,000 or some ridiculous thing to get an EpiPen.
yeah,
And, homeopathy is like a little vial like this is like $7.
right.
It has 80 pellets in it that could last quite a very long time.
hmm And it's not individualized either. I mean, the
Right.
homeopathic doctor takes more than 15 minutes with you.
Yeah. When I do, different practitioners, obviously have different practices. I think practitioners in homeopathy are just as individualized as the, remedies we prescribed. We all kind of have different practices. My practice is very focused on mental emotional symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
Although I have a lot of neurological cases that I'm working on that are fantastic, that are going really well. But that's also because my training is in depth psychology and somatics
Mm-hmm.
and homeopathy. So that's kind of my realm. And some people specialize in children or acute or, aging diseases. So I think everybody does kind of a different thing.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened with my practice that it's just been so interesting to me is I have a lot of cases that are of people who are using psychedelics in terms of wanting to heal something, or they're involved in the psychedelic world for some reason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting because homeopathy is kind of marginalized as a field and psychedelics have been, kind of taboo
Right.
historically. They're kind of just now coming back online and people are, they're starting to get some traction in terms of healing. The research is starting to come on and people are starting to realize like, oh, there might be something there. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people dabbling, but there are a lot of people who are afraid to tell their doctors that they're dabbling.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of ill effect. And that's what I see in my practice is people who've done LSD or psilocybin or, who've gone, I have like, here's an example. I have a client who went to Costa Rica to do an ayahuasca ceremony
Mm-hmm.
for some healing because she had some trauma in her history and she wanted to do some healing. So she went to Costa Rica and she got there Friday night. They did a bufo ceremony, which is a toad poison where they burn it on your skin. And they burn your skin, put the poison on there. She had whatever reaction to that. Saturday they did, and they did a psilocybin magic mushroom ceremony for about 6 hours, and then she went out. They went out that night to go get some food and stuff. She got robbed while they went out, and she was traumatized by that. And then she came back, and the next morning they got up and did an ayahuasca ceremony for like 6 or 8 hours
All
that
of
day,
these in a row?
all in a row. And it's like so absurd, right? Like how can you even track what's
Overkill.
happening?
Yeah.
So she was really messed up from all of it. She was absolutely terrified. She was kind of stuck in that state, that
Mm-hmm.
traumatic state of the altered state from the drugs, and then the altered state from the trauma. Drugs and trauma both create altered states.
Mm-hmm.
So she was in that altered state from the drugs and the trauma. And when you looked at her, her eyes were really wide and glassy, and you could tell she was in total shock still.
Yeah.
So I was able to work with her and gave her some remedies, and over time just a few weeks of taking the remedy, she
Mhm.
settled in. But, they do these retreats, these sort of drug experience retreats are often run by U.S. companies and
Really?
U.S. entrepreneurs going into other cultures and sort of appropriating their sacred medicine, their plant medicines to give to wealthy Americans who can afford to go, take the substances. So it's just a strange kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Making money everywhere.
Making money everywhere. There's like, it's thought it's going to be like a $10.75 billion industry by like 2027.
Wow. Well, I hear different people going for the ayahuasca, and some of them really like it and they've been doing it for years. I mean, and then you listen to Graham Hancock. I mean,
Yeah.
he's been doing it for 30 years,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
think he does it, moderately. It isn't like this.
Yeah. I think I think the substances just, they're powerful. Plant earth medicine is very, very powerful. That's one of the reasons why homeopathy as a plant-based medicine can be very, very powerful too.
Mhm.
Um, but I think that it gets decontextualized,
Mhm.
when you remove it from its original location geographically and
Mhm.
people that are in and have relationship with it, and you pull it out of there and monetize it and have people running ayahuasca ceremonies who aren't actually in relationship with the plants and the culture and the
Right.
people and the substance, then you're by decontextualizing it, you're sort of setting yourself up for a lot of trouble.
So you're seeing a
Problems.
lot of problems with this?
I am seeing a lot of problems with it, and I think it's a lot of it's because of that. The other thing with the psychedelics is set and setting is very, very important because psychedelics are a non-specific amplifier, so
Mhm.
they can amplify kind of anything. So if you're at a concert and you do psychedelics, you could get into a pickle because it can amplify something that you're not ready to process in that environment.
Mhm.
So I get a lot of those kind of people coming in where they, you know, kind of playing around and did some psychedelics and then end up traumatized, like truly traumatized from it. And so then they come for help.
Well, it's interesting that homeopathy is like something that can help that.
It
Yeah.
is interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And again, it's speaking to the like treats like
Hmm.
thing is, that heightened state or that um alternate state of consciousness that plants do that,
So
plants
you
create
have
altered states.
potentized ayahuasca in your office?
We do. Yeah,
You do?
we do.
Oh, I
Yeah.
see. So it is like treats
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean like, for example, I have this client who has she developed hyperemetic syndrome
Mhm.
from vaping cannabis.
Mhm.
And she's a young person and had a ton of anxiety and started using cannabis as a way to mitigate her anxiety and developed hyperemetic syndrome, which is just constant vomiting and nausea,
Mhm.
and could not get out of that sort of loop and spent a month going in and out of the emergency room because she couldn't get out of the loop. And the remedy that I gave her was not a drug remedy at all. It was a remedy for stomach aches
Oh,
and something that you wouldn't even think of. But she had this really interesting thing um, with the nausea and the vomiting. She hated food and she was in a foul mood all the time. Like it was one of the hardest cases I've ever taken
mm,
because she wasn't responsive to me. And then if I said anything out of line, she kind of yelled at me. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is such a challenging case. Like I feel like I'm being abused, right? But that was the essence of the case. And that remedy has a lot of irritability and
mhm,
crankiness and moodiness.
mm,
And she had one thing that we call strange, rare, and peculiar symptoms in homeopathy. It's
mhm,
something that's kind of absurd or like it could be a slip of tongue that happens in a conversation like parapraxis, or a denial that you'll notice in cases sometimes, or it could just be a really strange symptom. So she hated food, but the only thing she liked was pickles. And she ate pickles all the time. And that was strange,
Yeah.
for someone who just doesn't want food. So I gave her the
Probably
remedy.
not pregnant.
No, not pregnant. And I gave her I hope not, she's young. And I gave her the remedy based partially on that craving for pickles. It really was the thing that indicated the remedy for me. And it has helped her so much. She hasn't been in the emergency room since August. And before that, she had been in and out all summer long. So, I mean, it's just really powerful and a wonderful tool to have.
But I mean that you can go like and just find pickles. You know what I mean? That it could be
Yeah.
so individualized is like amazing, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. It is amazing. And, that's why, so like when we take a case, we ask everything. I mean, we really get into the personal. We have we look at the psychological, the mind and mental emotional symptoms, all the way to poop and dreams and, everything. We kind of go through all the body systems. So like the head down to the toes, from the inside out. And we kind of look at how, how two people can have a similar experience and they both respond differently to that. And that's how homeopathy is really beautiful, because it can look at those individual responses or reactions to the same stimulus, and it will be different remedies.
Whereas if it was allopathic, it would just be the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I like to use asthma because it's such a common thing that we see, is that asthmatic experiences are different. Some asthmatics get worse by running, some don't. Some get better by cold, some get worse by cold, all those things. And it just helps you get into the very individualized aspect of homeopathy.
Now, Hahnemann, his lifespan, was it like it stayed, or did it start decaying during his lifespan?
His lifespan, no, I think it stayed, and he continued to work. I have to say the history of homeopathy is not my strongest suit, but he did do, and other people like Kent took on his work, and other homeopaths of that time took on his work and continued it. And he continued to work. He was exiled at one point. And that was part of the issue, I believe.
Exiled to where?
I think he was exiled into Germany, or maybe out of Germany. I don't remember.
Yeah, but I mean, it's an interesting concept.
Yeah. So, I have to say, I don't even think homeopathy was a popular thing in its time. Like, there were people who were against him and his work, even at the time. There's always people who are, pursuing interesting and novel ideas and concepts, and they will, whatever the main hegemonic system is going to buck that, right? They're not going to want any part of that.
So is homeopathy on the rise now, or what's the state?
We're kind of often dealing with the FDA in our business, trying to, understand us and wanting to, homeopathy is not easy to study because it's so individualized. And when you're giving drug remedies or plant medicines, substances that are, in their crude form could be poisonous, then of course, the FDA is going to take interest in that. And, I think their desire is to keep people safe. But I think the thing that makes homeopathy so hard to understand, is the dilution process, right? One. But also what makes it hard to understand is it's so individualized. So like, to do a study on homeopathy, you would have to have, say you were going to study arsenicum, a remedy made from arsenic. If you were going to do that, they would have to be people who kind of needed that remedy. So you, in a way, they would have to have an arsenicum type
Oh, I see.
constitution.
They're not having the appropriate people for the medicine
Yeah.
there.
So to
Oh,
do double blind studies and stuff, it just won't work because if you don't have the similar thing,
right.
it's not going to resonate with you. It's going to do nothing for you.
Oh,
So it makes it really difficult to study.
mm-hmm,
So that's one of the dilemmas that we're up against. But I think, at least like in the work that I'm doing, I'm really trying to teach homeopathic thinking because the way we think about people and constitutions, the individualizing characteristics of people,
mm-hmm,
um, is beautiful and powerful. And so my goal is to teach therapists how to think like homeopaths, because I think, and even medical doctors and whatnot, because we don't really pathologize. We kind of look at uh, patients or clients where they are. We see it as a state that
mm-hmm,
is created by environmental and personal, mental, emotional, physical factors.
mm-hmm.
So we're kind of really just, uh, when we take a case, we're asking a whole bunch of questions. We may spend 2 hours talking. A lot of homeopaths spend 2 hours talking to someone for the first consultation. And
Mm-hmm.
we get a full family history. We're looking at the chronic history, the chronic disease history of the family. We're taking that into consideration. We're taking into consideration their personal history and their environmental influences and how their vital force is sort of reacting to it all.
Mm-hmm.
So, again, it makes it very, very individualized. And but the way that we think about it as being a state
Mm-hmm.
and not pathologizing is, I think a lot of people feel really welcomed in homeopathy when they come to get homeopathy.
Mm-hmm.
So many people arrive and they'll say, wow, I've never felt so seen or witnessed or so heard. And
Mm-hmm.
it's because we just sit back and we're good listeners and
Right.
we ask just the right questions at the right time. So people can, so many medical doctors, they rush you through.
Right.
You get like maybe 5 minutes, maybe if you're lucky. And most of the time doctors are on their computers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had these instances where I've gone in for, a checkup and they don't even and I've actually said to them, you didn't look at me the whole time you were in the room. You looked at your computer, but
Yeah.
like you never made eye contact with me. You kind of just
Isn't
want to
that
go,
amazing? They're not even looking. I mean, there's so much you can just see looking.
absolutely. Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things for me, as a practitioner, I've always had a virtual practice. I've never had an in-person practice,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm a super visual person. I learn so much by seeing, by looking at the person's environment, by seeing the person and the way that they gesture. You can learn this really interesting things from people,
Mm-hmm.
uh, about how they hold themselves and things like that. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how medical,
I see
it's
how
kind of
that just
unfortunate.
really translate into therapy,
Mhm.
mental, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the mind symptoms in homeopathy are wonderful. And we have huge, massive books on just, like thick, huge books on just mind symptoms alone. There's a lot of delusions and fears in the mind section. So, one of the questions we often ask people is, what kinds of things are you afraid of?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm afraid of ladders. I'm afraid of heights. I'm afraid of bridges. I'm afraid of snakes or,
Right.
or, they could be really random things. Again, that gets you back into the strange, rare and peculiar symptoms, but it's information
Mm-hmm.
about um, their unique fingerprint in the world, right? Each organism has its own, including us,
Mm-hmm.
unique fingerprint.
Well, it just seems like had your fear of birds. Maybe the feather remedy you were talking about would
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
I was
right.
thinking that when you were going through that. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to think if I don't know if that's true for the bird cases, but I know calcarea is one of the remedies that's afraid of birds. Um, but there are interesting cases where you see like a good lineup like that where it's like
Mm-hmm.
it matches really literally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's not as often that the match is that literal.
Right.
Usually it's the whole pattern
Mm-hmm.
that so you got to be careful because it is easy as a practitioner to say, what's your favorite animal?
Right.
Or if you could be an animal, what and a tiger, right? And then pretty soon you're looking at the tiger milk remedies, and it's not really the case, but it just,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's tempting. Although I have given tiger's milk to a little girl who acted like a little tiger, and she was just hissing and spitting and carrying on, and it was like a totally great remedy for her.
Oh, this must be so like just when this happens, like you just can't believe sometimes,
Yeah.
right?
Oh yeah. It's so interesting because you just can't. Oh, I'll tell you a cool case. So here's an example of this. I have this client who she's in my friend group too, and she came to me for homeopathy. And one of the things that I would hear, she's really, really intelligent and a beautiful person. But one of the things I would hear about her in the friend group is like, oh, I really like Barbara. She's so sweet, but she's really out there. She's like really spacey. She's really a trip, you know? And
Mm-hmm.
and I have been giving her a couple of remedies, and I was like, I just felt like I wasn't quite on target.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was sitting one day, and one of the friends said, Barbara is the sweetest person, but she is such a trip. And I thought, oh, there it is. She's a trip. And so I went back to her intake form, and she said that she did a bunch of LSD when she was 16 and
Oh,
17. So I gave her the remedy
that's a good
LSD,
one. Uh-huh.
and it totally changed things for her. It really shifted her. She got more grounded,
Mm-hmm.
and the friend group noticed it. Even the friend group was like, have you noticed that Barbara has been really like she's so much more grounded? Like, I don't know what happened. They were saying it.
Mm-hmm.
So but it allowed her to kind of get in this time space continuum a little more.
Mm-hmm.
uh and like a lot of her suffering was because she couldn't connect to people. She kind of um she wanted to be in relationship with people, but she just couldn't seem to connect,
Mm-hmm.
and that remedy really helped her.
Oh, you have
Yeah.
to be a detective in this.
Yeah, it is. And that's the fun part, because, for me, my personal thing is like, I just always want to reach my highest truth form of my own human potential and soul
Mm-hmm.
potential.
Mm-hmm.
And I fell into homeopathy because the goal of homeopathy is to help people meet their highest, truest form of potential, soul and human potential. So it's not work for me. It's like breathing, right? It's just natural for me to do
Mm-hmm.
this. And
Yeah.
it's endless learning. It's super fun. Uh,
So great you found this,
mhm.
this field. Yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoy it.
Okay, well, this was a really interesting interview from Tiger's Milk to, I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's really, now you've got a great website.
thank
It's
you, Carol.
called functionalalchemy.org.
Yeah, .org.
And
Yeah.
so like I was on there this week earlier and you've got that book on there. It's like a good book that if people are interested in really seeing what homeopathy is about, there's a link and the book comes up and you can read. It's good. Yeah.
Yeah, it's called Beyond Flat Earth Medicine. It's a really great homeopathic introduction.
Mm-hmm.
It's free. You can get the PDF online. Just go to beyondflatearthmedicine.com and you can access the PDF. And it's Timothy Doolittle. And it's a nice little introductory book.
I love Beyond
It's hard to
Flat
squeeze
Earth.
homeopathy into 45 minutes.
Huh?
What did you say?
I love the name Beyond Flat Earth
Yeah, right.
Medicine. Yeah.
Yeah. I keep thinking, someday we're going to be able to measure remedies, and we'll be
Mm-hmm.
able to see that we were right all along,
Mm-hmm.
about it and all these.
Well, it
people
seems
who
like
can't
these
imagine.
radionic devices that they're getting so sophisticated now that it seems like it'll be there, you know?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah, but in the meantime, you know, we just keep doing it, and we still
Okay.
keep getting clients and
So
people who
people
are interested.
can contact you
They
at your
can
website, right?
they can contact. They can get they can send me an email, or they can get my phone number on the website and reach out to me.
And what's your email?
Vanessa at vanessablackhomeopathy.com.
Okay. And when I post this, we'll put all of that below so
Okay,
you can contact.
great.
Well, thanks,
Yeah.
Vanessa. This
Thanks
was
for having me, Carol.
always interesting,
It's so great
no
to
matter
see you
which
too.
field you're in. Okay. And
Thank
I'll
you.
see everybody at the next one. So bye.